The other big news this week was the release of the annual Customer Loyalty Engagement Index. Now, if you don't know about this study, it's huge. They surveyed 75,000 people talking about 855 different brands. And today we're lucky enough to talk with two guys to give us insight on this. We have Dave Frankland from Atlaas and Robert Passikoff, the CEO of Brand Keys, which produced the study. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here, first of all. And getting right into it, as we look into the study, it's very, very interesting where a lot of companies landed. You broke it up into four quadrants: upper right, upper left, lower right. The upper right is where you want to be. And we're going to show you the graph right now, or part of it. And one of the first things that jumped out to me, Robert, was the fact that the NFL was in the lower left quadrant and you had MLB in the upper right. Now, I know that MLB viewership is down. I know the league's been struggling. The NFL, meanwhile, seems like it has a sterling brand. So why is that?
Well, I wouldn't agree that the NFL has a sterling brand. And part of the measures that we're looking at are emotional engagement and a matter of meeting expectations. I think that the NFL has turned off a lot of people on an emotional basis, whereas baseball has been baseball. And I don't think that they've done the kind of publicity, activities, behavior that you've seen from the NFL in the past year.
I've seen a few of these studies that you've put out in the past few years, Robert, and I think they have a value from just being really interesting to see how certain brands compare. But what I have come to understand is that the underlying data is actually actionable and directional. And Dave, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's what Atlaas is all about.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I would agree with you 100% that this is not just interesting. I think it's fascinating. I can geek out all day on where companies are and why they are. And what's most interesting to me, I think, is when you talk to Robert and understand what's behind all of this, both the psychological profiling as well as understanding the attitudes, behaviors, benefits, values that consumers expect from a given category. What we find is that companies, and whether you take the likes of the NFL or MLB or any of the other brands on here, what we find is that often different aspects of the business are pulling in different directions. So you have a CX team doing one thing and a customer engagement team doing another thing, and they're all measuring different things. They're not starting from that customer expectation, which is what Robert helps us get to so well. And as a result, they're completely misaligned. All parts of the business trying to go in different directions. And where we see success is when companies bring all of those into alignment and get everyone marching in, not just in the same direction, but in the direction that allows them to meet and exceed customer expectations.
You may have already answered the question, David, but I'm going to put this out there for you and Robert. And you look again at the graph of the companies that are doing exceptionally well: Ford, Clorox, Amazon, Dunkin' Donuts, Discover. What are those companies doing right? Let's start with you, Robert.
Again, we talk about emotional engagement. And what that means is that the companies mean something to the consumer. If you look at the map, it becomes kind of the acid test. Is you look at a brand and you do the psychological word association. What does it stand for? And a lot of the stuff that falls off to the lower left, you kind of go, well, here's the category it stands for. Not that there's any resonance about the brand. Because all those brands, people know those brands. They know all of those brands. And that's why we looked at the things that were driving loyalty and behavior were really twofold. One was, can you emotionally engage me? Which means, are you meaningful to me? And the other side of it is, I have expectations about the category. How well do you meet those?
I was fascinated, yes, by the MLB NFL comparison, but maybe a little more so by the Dunkin' Donuts Starbucks comparison.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
And so Dunkin' Donuts ended up way up in the northeast quadrant. It looks like, that's exactly where you want to be. And yet everybody in this space seems to be raving about how well Starbucks executes its programs. Is there anything we can unpack from this, Dave and Robert?
In transparency, we've worked for Dunkin' for a number of years, and the kind of gap analysis as to what people expect and what you can translate into creative, that gave birth to the America Runs on Dunkin'. Tell me what Starbucks does. I mean, besides give you coffee.
Overpriced coffee, I might add. I'm a big Dunkin' Donuts guy, so I was happy to see that. But I have very low expectations when I go into Dunkin' Donuts, and maybe that's why they're always met.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, I wasn't adding anything of value whatsoever. Dave, why don't you save me from myself here and add to what Robert was saying?
So I think I'd say a couple of things. I think one, Dunkin' has had a complete rebrand in the last 12 months. They're actually still going through that, right? So what used to be Dunkin' Donuts now runs on coffee and has changed its name to Dunkin'. They've been rebranding. They've been changing how they talk about things. They sort of have a very deliberate strategy of making fun, frankly, of fancy names for products, and they're the sort of everyman brand, as it were. Whereas Starbucks, since it expanded outside of Seattle, has been trying to bring that sort of I can say this as a European, but that chic European
coffee house
halo sort of to their brand, which makes it a bit elitist to some people. I think Starbucks ran into challenges with not allowing people to use the bathroom. That was highly publicized, right? And so they've had some knocks on the brand that I think Dunkin' hasn't. And so my assumption, again, without digging into all of the data and giving away what Robert charges good money for, my assumption as an observer would be that Dunkin' has been focused on evolving that brand, where I think Starbucks is still maintaining what is a very solid, strong brand, but they've been in maintenance mode rather than evolution mode.
Robert, if you've put this together for, I think we're at 25 years right now.
Yeah, this is the 25th year.
The 25th year. So you've got some history with this. Having seen all that, what was the biggest surprise in this year's Customer Loyalty Engagement Index?
Wow. Well, I guess that there weren't a lot of new brands that showed up at the top of the list. And that we've had a switch over of about half of the categories in terms of who's ending up in that upper right-hand quadrant. It's gotten tougher. I mean, I asked the question about, made the statement about the ideal. Expectations increase a lot faster than most brands keep up. Well, let me correct myself. Expectations increase faster than any brands keep up. These brands all seem to be doing something special that people are recognizing, whether it's on an articulated basis or just an internalized basis.
And what's interesting is that it's not just about the product, it's also about the image. If I'm, am I right on that one, Robert? Because like the NFL, I mean, yes, the on-field product, the ratings are high, but yes, you're right. There's been some public relations issues that have soiled some of the brand. You mentioned the issue of the bathrooms, David, with Starbucks. Those are news events, but those have an effect on brand loyalty.
Yeah, but it can kill a brand. I mean, you want a really bad example. Take a look at what happened to Victoria's Secret. Yeah, it is image largely, but it's also meaning. Because what I said before about being able to name a brand and tell me what it stands for, and not have to look for it. I mean, you go to the lowest one on the chart and you go, Bing. And what you're going to say to me is it's search. And that's it.
I would say you look at that bottom left category, and taking the Victoria's Secret example, you could also point to Wells Fargo, Volkswagen, who've had some really high profile snafus, let's be polite. But compare a Mazda to a Hyundai. When I said to my wife that Hyundai was the highest scoring auto company, she was shocked. Because not everybody, as again, Robert's data shows us, not everyone's expectation is the same for each brand. But I think that is an example of a brand that's done a phenomenal job of shifting expectations and creating loyalty, engendering loyalty in the true sense of the word. Which again, I think is what Robert looks at, isn't sort of your loyalty program. It's how loyal are you to the brand. And Hyundai has done everything from being the first company to have the 100,000 mile warranty, right? So that started to change perceptions of how we used to always point to Honda and Toyota as the cars that ran forever. Hyundai sort of had their warranty outlasted them by significant percentage. The last economic downturn, Hyundai was the first one out to sort of say, if you lose your job, you're not going to be in trouble. We're going to help you, et cetera. And so it changes your perception of what a car company is and does, as opposed to focusing just on fuel efficiency and safety and all those things that are critically important in a car.
Rafe, just, in terms of numbers, they went from 2% sales to 14% sales when the entire industry was down 36%.
That's fascinating, especially in a pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible how what they're able to do with just the fact that that's what they stand for now.
I'll answer the question you asked, Robert, a little differently than you asked it. I'll do two things. One is the question about surprises. Perhaps the one that's surprising but not is Clorox. To think of emotional engagement with a brand like Clorox, I raised my eyebrows initially, and then I'm like, but wait, this is looking at 2020 when we're in the middle of a pandemic, and it makes perfect sense that a brand that you trust, right, which is a huge component of that of what you expect from that brand, that I trust this is going to clean my house, kill all known germs, and hopefully the ones we didn't know existed a year ago. It makes perfect sense that would be higher. And Robert, I don't know if that changed over the course of several years. And the one that's not on the go ahead.
It's a great point. In fact, to tool up for the January survey, we do something in September, which is the loyalty leaders list. It's kind of a cross-category view of things. And that's when we see when brands are starting to resonate. And Clorox showed up for the first time this year. And, partly you go, okay, I mean, I got it, I got it. I mean, you won't be amazed for me to tell you also, although we don't look at the category, that Purell showed up for the first time this year.
So just to put a fine point on it, what we're talking about is data from the 2020 Customer Loyalty Index from Brand Keys, who
2021,
who produces the data and the research, and Dave Frankland from Atlaas, whose company helps other brands to move from one quadrant up into the Northeast, as it were. So I think we've got a nice little symbiosis going on here.
Yeah, it works. It works really well. I mean, we are. I'm always honest about the fact that it was the ad agency for Hyundai that came up with the assurance program, but it was the gap analysis in terms of expectations and what the brand might believably be able to fill that identifies that. I mean, we can go back, and this is going back some, but we did the work years ago when Domino's was really pretty much a crappy brand. And their new CEO came in and said, we're going to redo everything because taste matters. How we present this stuff matters.
Robert Passikoff from Brand Keys, David Frankland from Atlaas. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks for
having us.
Thanks for joining us on TheCustomer TV. See you next time.